Yo, what is going on, everybody? It's Brave Cat here once again with another Frontier Signals update. So things have been drastically heating up, especially as the comet PANSTARRS has made its approach near the sun. So we have seen a lot of flare activity in the last few days here, with all these bright active regions and sunspot groups pretty much having some sort of activity going on. So we can take a better look at that here on the X-ray flux for the last 7 days. So things were pretty much totally dead quiet, not even so much as an M flare. And then things have pretty much picked up exponentially since then. So that's why, things can change on a dime. And it seems like it is no coincidence that we've been seeing this activity with the approach of the comet. We saw the same exact thing happen with 3i Atlas. We saw the same exact thing happen with the other comet, Comet Maps. So as this comet has approached, the sun has basically gone into a temper tantrum, including 2 X-class flares and several in the M-class region here. So that has definitely, that really kind of tells the story right there just in that one graph. And we take a look at the coronagraph feeds where we can actually see the comet. So it's not doing the close, super close approach that Comet Maps did, but it is definitely close enough to cause some things going on here. So we can take a look at a couple of these here. This one, pretty detailed for just kind of like raw contrast. We can kind of see all the different plasma shooting out, the different flares. We can see the comet. We take it to the LASCO C2. This one is a little bit more zoomed in on the sun, so it's too close to actually see the comet, but you can get an even better look at some of the flare activity just in the last 24 hours, which I believe things have actually toned down a little bit, just looking up at the 3-day feed here. So I don't know why it has this huge gap here. It should be showing the 2 previous days as well, but we got this one, so the 2 X flares and a near X flare, and then today not really so much. And surprisingly, the magnetic field has been holding up well, but I don't think really any of these blasts have been directed at us. A lot of them have been north facing. So if we take a look at the 304 angstroms showing the last few days here, we should be able to capture some of the bigger flares. So like there was that very spontaneous one right up here, and as well as another one over here. Pretty much totally kind of northward directed there, and then over here as well. Had some stuff going on. So luckily none of it's been pointed right at us, so I suppose we shouldn't really expect to see any turbulence. And we've seen the coronal holes pretty much go away and be replaced with the active sunspot regions here. And it looks like we have potentially more of that going forward here, looking at the farside sunspot images. There's been a couple regions that have come through which weren't really necessarily in the regions that were labeled, but it looks like we have some more potential sunspot regions over there on the far side. So looking out for that in the next couple weeks here. So taking a look at things earthquake-wise, there's definitely been quite a bit going on there as well. So let's take a look at, roughly the past couple days here, more than the last 24 hours, where we've seen quite a bit of movement going on all across the northern side of the Pacific. Everything down south here is pretty much as expected, with maybe a little bit more going on over here south of the Philippines. But then pretty much taking things all the way from Japan, all the way over here to the west coast. Things have continued to see seismic unrest going throughout this entire plate boundary here. So we did have that fairly large earthquake over here in Japan, and that has been unsettling the surrounding regions. And if we take a look over here in Europe, we have more interesting developments. So right off the bat, you can see this large tremor/earthquake swarm going up into the 4 range with, I believe, actually, I think there's a couple 5s in there as well. So 4.9, couple fives, along with just a ton of somewhat smaller activity there. So, at this point, we've pretty much seen several locations have these kind of breakages happen and these different clusters breaking out. So we saw Western Turkey going off for a while, and then we saw that kind of translate over here to Greece. So that was going off for a little bit. And now it looks like pretty much right in between those 2 points, right down here at the actual plate boundary, now we have a new cluster of sizable tremors and earthquakes going on there, as well as another deep earthquake. So this one is a 4 down here near Italy. So that's also becoming a bit of a common theme, seeing deep earthquakes striking right here in this water here, right at the southern tip of Italy, going into Sicily. So get a little bit of a better look at that, what's been going on the last 24 hours. There's that deep 4, and there's been, a little bit of stuff going on up here in the mountain range, and once again, kind of south of the plate boundary itself, seeing some continued activity there. But it's mostly this one here that we gotta pay attention to, is these, moderately sized deep earthquakes, or oops, well, that was my VS code. All these deep earthquakes striking over here. And I think that pretty much does it, although I do want to kind of go over some of the forecasted areas that Dutch Sense has done, because, well, quite a few of them haven't really happened. So he warned for a 4.0 or greater to be striking the New Madrid zone, which did in fact strike. But then he was also looking for a 6.0 over here in the Gulf of California, and that has not happened. I guess we give it till like tomorrow, and if that doesn't happen, then that was definitely not a forecasted strike zone. And then it looks like he is also looking for a similar sized 4 up here in the very northeast of the United States, going up into Quebec. So we can just kind of take a look at some of the notes there in the last few days from his live streams. So the most recent one, the 4.0 struck the New Madrid, and now he's looking for actually a 5.7 to a 6 as well, going out into western Nevada at the California border. Now that one does actually seem to be likely. I mean, it's right over here where we've already been seeing all this previous activity right here. So, that wouldn't really be too much of a surprise, considering there's been an ongoing swarm there as well. Let's just take another quick look down the list here. Really just looking at the forecasted / expected earthquake areas here. So looking for a swarm in New Jersey, potentially next to Trump's golf course. I don't know why that's been, a topic, but, there has been some earthquake striking over there. And you can say what you will about that. A little bit older here. New Madrid zone, that's when he mentioned that a few days ago. Saying that the East Coast should also step up by almost 2 magnitudes, and Texas should start moving exponentially due to the 2 4.7s in Northwest California. Well, as I'm kind of observing these things for myself, I'm kind of disagreeing with that. I think the 4s, aren't really dictating as much what happens next. I think it's more to do with, the larger activity that is going to have a lasting impact on those 2 things. Although it's not completely out of the question. When you have different 4s, so right now we have several 4s going all the way down the West Coast. So it's not entirely out of the question, but just basing forecasting just off of 4s striking, I think there's still kind of a bigger picture playing out there with other variables in play. So we'll just have to see how things go throughout the week here, but I'm just kind of, comparing different research, different observations, and seeing what actually happens. These plate boundaries, they have so much elasticity and they can build up so much pressure before they actually release. So that is primarily what makes earthquake forecasting so difficult, is, the fact that they can be very unpredictable in that regard. They can build up energy and potential for quite a while before it actually goes off. But that being said, we do have a lot of stuff going on up here, specifically in the North Pacific, from Japan, again, over here down to the West Coast. So I don't see anything really slowing down anytime soon. Like I said, I think this is going to be a very long, kind of drawn out series of events as the pressure builds up and releases. And a lot of the previous, kind of subduction zone pressure building up over here, specifically in the West Coast, that takes time to actually play out. So this is looking at from, the 14th all the way to today. So this entire segment here, that has gone quiet since we had an uptick in events here. So this is what's been going on in roughly the past, almost 2 weeks. So not really a whole lot, but we have seen some movement going on over a pretty large area. And taking things over here to the volcanoes, things have had a bit of an uptick there as well. We've had 8 different volcanoes having ongoing ash plumes. Some of them, the typical ones. Others have been a little bit spotty. But it looks like the past couple days here, it's been pretty consistent in terms of eruptions. But I don't think there's really been anything new in any sort of dormant systems that are to be worried about. And even the earthquakes over here in Italy haven't really, they haven't really spelled any sort of potential for the magma chambers, but again, we got to keep an eye out for those deep earthquakes going forward. So that pretty much wrapped things up here. One last thing I wanted to mention here, apparently there's another large church fire here. So one of the oldest churches in New York City is being burned up, and that seems to be quite a trend in recent years where churches are just kind of burning to the ground, and it's kind of worrying. It's not what you want to see, obviously. So, we definitely got to kind of protect those values and, just hold those things, sacred, because, everything's under attack. Religion is under attack, and, things are getting a little bit chaotic. So, with that, though, I will wrap things up there. So, hope you all enjoyed, got something out of it for today. Please like and subscribe for more. Share this video if you dare, and as always, I'll catch you all in the next.